Hey, Ryan, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I was able to make it out here with the commute.
I know. I'm so glad you're able to find the time and be here today. But, of course, first I have to thank you for putting the show together and for all of the creative collaboration that we've had so far. I mean, it's really evolved and it's been exciting.
Yeah, it's been fun. I definitely thought a oil and gas focused podcast here in Midland was long overdue. So I was thrilled when you approached me with the idea, and let's keep it going. We're just getting started.
Right. There's so much that we're going to be able to do because there's so much here, and I know that not being local to the Permian Basin, being from Las Vegas, you're very new to oil and gas, and you don't really know much about it. I'm sure you've learned quite a bit just in the short amount of time, just hearing jargon and the way
jargon
things
for
work.
Sure. I don't know that I've actually been able to deep dive per se, but over the holiday, I was able to understand a little bit more about downstream and midstream and upstream.
Hey, there you go. You're coming on.
I got to start somewhere, right?
You really do. And honestly, I've been around oil and gas in different degrees my whole life. And so you understand it is like your proximity to it. If your exposure is from the outside, you're going to have that outside view. If you're working in the field, if you're working in an office. And so there's a lot of different ways to interpret oil and gas. And I think that's where the narratives get crossed, because there's so much of just that mainstream narrative of oil and gas is bad. And you see, the horrific images of what we're doing to the planet, but not understanding, the products that are made from that, because we're in an industrial hub. And so you're literally seeing that product in its original form coming out of the ground and the process it takes to get there.
Yeah, I think what I've recognized as a whole about this industry, and again, I never had any sort of like negative connotations to anything. Like, I get it, the whole fossil fuels, and people on one side are like, oh, let's save the planet, and the other people are like, let's make a bunch of money. I'm probably on the side of making money, to be honest with you. However, I can see both sides. I think now have been here, and my wife's from Midland and her family's from Midland. I can definitely see the aspects of like, hey, at the end of the day, we're all trying to feed our families and put roofs over our kids' head and send our kids to college and really make a life for ourselves. Less about the, how is this going to affect, the planet 100 years from now? Like, I think the other side of it is, more importantly, was I didn't know how much or what the number of products that were created from petroleum. And I'm going to probably use incorrect jargon. Please don't come for me in the comments. But I mean, I didn't recognize like my shoes, the tires on my car, my phone, my Xbox, or whatever it may be, right? I was just sitting there going like, gas for your car, and oil is something I put in my engine, I guess. Somebody else does it because I don't even know what I'm doing. But not recognizing like, oh yeah, like it's not like you can just go like stop all drilling and fracking and all that stuff.
You really
cease
can't,
everything.
because that's going to eliminate a lot more than just the oil and gas industry. It's
Sure.
going to that would eliminate a lot of our consumables that are necessary, that have become necessary. There was a time when you didn't have to have a cell phone, and then a time when you didn't have to have a smartphone. You didn't have to have an email address, and now you have to have the smartphone with the email readily available for your job just
Sure.
to communicate. And so, it's not something that people are going to just sit around on a daily basis and think about, where all of this comes from or what the world's going to look like in 100 years. And there's a lot of fear-based conversations of what the planet's going to look like. But if you look over time in the media, fear creates that narrative, and it gains the views. And so the more dramatic you can make it, the more controversial. And
if it bleeds, it leads.
Exactly.
Sure.
And so you have to see beyond all of that. And so, for you coming here and, of course, like you said, your wife is from Midland, and Tara's family is from Midland. And so you're brand new, but you're from Vegas, so you're from the same desert climate. So
that was fine.
That was okay.
That was fine.
Me living in Vegas briefly, that was part of the appeal of the Permian Basin, because I really did like the weather. I like the dry climate. and it worked for me. And then, being in oil and gas as long as I have, Midland is a really nice place to be. I feel like you can have your own identity here. And I mean, you guys have just thrived with Best of Midland, and, building that and using, a lot of your own tools and resources to create your own space here. And now it's evolved, going from, Best of Midland to the Best of Midland podcast to now having the 40 Wolf Studios open to the public in the Petroleum Building. You can't get more oil and gas than that downtown. And I know I'm always telling you that, but it's true. It's a landmark. A lot of the buildings have come down around here, and then you've got this building that I think that we met someone on the elevator one day coming up here that said this building was built in 1929. Somewhere,
in the 20s, I believe.
In the 20s. And so you don't have a lot of that nostalgia left, because we're always looking, progressively, and, how can we move forward and, have the best and state of the art. And so to have this, this historical landmark that you've moved into, and we're getting to tell all these oil and gas stories, it's very special.
Yeah. I mean, I find these stories very interesting. And I do get the opportunity to sort of learn, from the insider's perspective. And again, I'm like, this is why I wanted to, start a podcast of my own, but then it sort of evolved into, create a podcast studio for the public. It clearly didn't make sense for me to start an oil and gas podcast.
Right.
I would have been, sussed out pretty quickly. But regardless of the industry, it's all about the storytelling. It's all about seeing different points of view. I had approached numerous people. Again, my background is in digital marketing and the creative world for, the past 2.5 decades. That's aging myself, but it is what it is. When I moved here during the global word that you're not supposed to say on YouTube, and no job. Moved here to be closer to my wife's family. And that was the first time in my life that it was relocating for family versus another notch in the career, staircase. And I just decided I'm not going to build anybody else's dream again, and I'll just start my own business. And I know how to do what I know how to do, right? And so regardless of the oil and gas industry or any other industry, I know marketing. And I know that, video is key these days, and social media and things like that. And that's my wheelhouse. And so, I looked at all of the benefits to creating a podcast or any sort of video content as a whole. And I also recognize that, the fact is that a lot of the companies here, tend to be a little behind in the digital space. And I'm like, how can I help in any way possible, right? My world comes from more small businesses and helping those people. But, I looked at it like this, to the outside world, this Permian Basin here is pretty controversial.
Oh, we are controversial. Public enemy number one.
And so, like you stated a few minutes ago, just having a YouTube channel, just producing content, you get to sort of address and sort of control the narrative. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much good that this is doing.
There is.
And for the day-to-day person, right? And families. And just providing all of these products for the world that most people aren't aware of. But like you're saying, but if you're going to let, the public media or whatever you want to call it, right, sort of control that narrative, then you're always going to sort of be at a disadvantage.
You really are, and you're allowing them to have the upper hand and keep it. But by being able to just educate and share, it makes it more personable, relatable, and gives it a context of understanding of what this is and who these everyday people are that work out here, that grow through the oil and gas industry, that become the leaders and the decision makers. But we always seem to kind of peak at this same battle of oil and gas is bad, green energy is good. And the thing is if we work together and we can show, hey, there's room for both. There's room to say we don't always have to use diesel. We can use solar panels on this. But we also have to be able to say solar panels aren't always going to be the answer. Neither are the wind farms. We're going to need fossil fuels and being able to come together. But a lot of people just don't want to work together.
Sure.
And a lot of people just want to be right and they want their way to dominate. But I think that, for me personally, in my history and what I can see just in the world today, it's not about being right. It's about doing what's right.
I agree. I can agree with that. Like, I think it's a great point that you're making to where, I don't know this industry. I don't know most industries, but I'm not so naive to think that it's all or nothing, right? It's 100%.
That's exactly right.
Or that, or else. I agree with you. Like in my sort of world, in the digital space and the marketing world, I think the big controversy right now is the use of AI, right? And it's going to take people's jobs, and I know the people in the oil and gas industry are talking about that too, and the trucking and all these things like that. I'm like, I go like this. One, every AI tool today is the worst it's ever going to be.
Right.
And I think it's not going anywhere, right? And so I am more worried about the people who refuse to embrace or refuse to make any sort of compromise versus the people who are going like, I'm just going to embrace this and I'm going to sort of like engage in it. And I'm going to do a deep dive. And I think that can span, any sort of industry as a whole, because, these types of topics, again, they're not going anywhere, right? Like all of a sudden we're not going to be talking about, forget it. We're not going to solar, forget it. Who cares? Wind, water, whatever it may be. I think you're right. I think people do need to find a way to sort of compromise and recognize that even nothing's going to happen tomorrow anyway.
Well, and it's always
incremental.
It's very incremental, and it's daily. And being able to see there's a reason why we have different types of energy, and that different types of energy can work in different settings. But there's so much more that we can do, and there's a lot more that we could get done if we skip the arguing and go straight to negotiating and compromising and figuring out how to blend it.
Sure.
And like to your point about AI, I think that a lot of people are digging their heels in and refusing to do it because they're afraid of what that could eliminate, because you do see dying breeds and things have become obsolete. Like, who still owns a VCR? But
Right.
you either evolve or you die. You get left behind. And if you don't learn how to embrace some of this new technology or this new way of conducting business, you won't survive anyway. So all of that resistance is going to kill you, or just not knowing how to implement it or use the tools.
Yeah.
These are the tools of the future.
Right.
We just need to learn how to use them and not allow them to be get abused or used excessively. You've got to be able to use things in moderation and know the limits and still be able to, utilize our human abilities. We're not ever going to be completely replaced, especially if we don't allow that. But if you work together and you
Sure.
learn how AI functions and you use that to better your business or improve your life, then you're actually ahead of the game. You're not selling out to this new technique. You're not ever going to prevent it from coming, because we're evolving as humans with our smartphones, with just the way that you can use a map and pull it up and you're anywhere and suddenly you know exactly where you are. Now we know when there's road construction. We know when there's, something that's happened that is going to detour you. Like, we're not going to be able to stop that. And that can actually save lives. It can save time. It's valuable, but you have to be able to perceive it and embody it in a way that it's going to work for you.
Sure. I agree. I'm excited for the future.
Yeah,
in all
I think
ways.
so. And it's hard. I was off social media for a while, and I would say when I got back on, I was I was very overwhelmed, because I had just taken a few years off of social media, and then when 2020 came around, I was trying to reconnect, and I really didn't like what I saw. And a lot of it was the context. A lot of it was the arguing and the fighting and there's just the negativity, and people will come at each other in comments for no other reason other than to have something to do. They don't really have anything to say, so they're just going to put something out there to fuel the fire, and it's a bunch of nonsense and wasted space. And I didn't understand reels and shorts and stories, because that was when I was on social media. It was basic Facebook. It was pictures and maybe a video and then you get on and you're entertained by the entertainment. It's not even just a tool where you can have a profile and connect with people. There's games and marketplace, and it was a lot. And so to be able to understand it incrementally, knowing you and doing this podcast has given me a wealth of experience and things that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But I think especially for oil and gas businesses or any business, but focusing primarily on this industry, by being able to get ahead of your competition, not by just plugging away with advertisement, but by producing good content and knowing how to put that out there to your customers, and also trying to show what it is that sets you apart. What are you doing?
Sure. Social media has definitely changed these days. I don't think we're past this world of finding out what our friends and family are up to.
Right.
My social media is not for my friends and family.
Not anymore.
It needs to be very focused. But I do think though that, the vast majority of people who are on social media are just consumers. They're voyeurs, right? They're not actually producing any content whatsoever. And a lot of it is just boredom, right? And so you kind of have to understand that as well. You can't be 100% in selling mode, right? And you can't be 100% in I'm just going to consume everything and just doom scroll on TikTok or something like that, especially if you're running a business. The reason why I felt that podcasting was such a strong tool for marketing, has nothing to do with clearly I'm not Joe Rogan, right? I'm not some famed celebrity, things like that. But the benefits of having a podcast are twofold. One, they build great relationships, right, with the guests that you bring on, and and getting to learn their story selfishly, letting them sort of get awareness to build their brand and their visibility. It's very helpful. Who knows, right? You might be on their podcast in 6 months or something like that, right? But the other side of it, to the world out there who are looking at this on their phones right now, the benefits are views today are the currency, right? For many businesses, you're not going to be on an earnings call, third quarter, talking about views on TikTok and things like that. It's not going to move the needle in those certain ways. It's all brand awareness, and you've got to be out there nonstop. And for me, dealing with small business owners, much of the time, they're burned out, having to come up with reels and TikToks, 3, 4, 5 days a week or whatever they tell you to how many times to post. I look at a podcast being as long as you can get somebody next to you, have a great conversation, you'd be doing that anyway, right? It's those hour-long conversations, half hour, whatever, that turn into all of the social media clips, that will fuel those. That's the vehicle. That's the gold of having a podcast, versus trying to have something scripted every single time and doing the things that get me are the people who are I'm dancing or something.
You're trying to invent
I'm trying to entertain people, but I'm an accountant.
Yeah,
you know
and
what I mean?
It doesn't translate. One, it's not authentic. You're literally trying to find a way. But the thing I think that really hooks people, one, it's the authenticity of the story, or what your company is doing, that's innovative, that is going kind of back to what we were talking about, incorporating wind and solar and everything renewable, and it's saying, well, hey, we are doing this thing, that is, a little bit more efficient and environmentally conscious. But nobody's going to know that unless you get on something like a podcast and put it out there in the world. Otherwise, it's business as usual. People are trying to come up with content to entertain people, right, hoping that entertainment is going to translate back into sales or back into those relationships.
Yeah, and I don't really, I get it, right? I get it. There, the bottom line, I get that part. Everybody wants to make money, but these days, I don't believe that posting to social media should have the direct intent with generating revenue, right? Indirectly, by all means.
Indirectly, absolutely.
Right? I think because then all you're going to do is talk about yourself, and you're talking about your products, and you're going to talk about your services, versus just providing value, right? There are three, sort of ways in talking about social media and things like that. You've got, entertain, inspire, educate.
Right.
If you can pick two. If you can do all three, fantastic, right? But a lot of that is you literally just have to be looking at, I'm just providing value at scale for free, knowing that because it's at scale, it's going to come back tenfold. It's just going to take time, right? You can't end every social media clip with like, buy now or click here, or, you know what I mean? You really have to be like, if we were literally just going out to lunch and I had a question, you know, about what you do in your industry or something like that, and you were like, oh, yeah, let me just tell you, right? You weren't sliding over an invoice. You weren't telling me to go to a website and giving me a promo code. You were like, I'm just going to tell you, whether you end up taking my services or not. That's what the new world of social media is. It's providing value at scale for free. That's how you grow, right? So again, from the podcast perspective, I just recognize that it's one of the easiest forms of content to create. So you just rinse and repeat, right? There's not Absolutely. A person on LinkedIn these days who's posting consistently on LinkedIn who isn't sort of recognizing, are people taking notice, right? Well, here's how they're going to take notice. A constant stream of video. And the way that you're going to do that, instead of just being looked at as, I'm just going to be on this nonstop talking to this camera the whole time, let somebody else come on and tell their story. It's not all about you in the first place, right? You're going to be looked at as the leader, the thought leader in the space anyways, because you're hosting this podcast. It's yours, right? You're providing this mechanism, this vehicle for people to tune in week and week out, whatever it may be, right? And it just so happens that you're getting an amazing amount of content to just keep streaming out. That is your conveyor belt.
You know, and I agree, and I can attest to that because, you know, in the short amount of time that we've been doing this, the people that I've met, the relationships that are starting to form are just, it's very authentic because I was working in the oil field. I do have years of experience, but now that I'm not working in the industry, it's like, what do you do? What do you do with all of that? And to be able to have a platform where people come on and they share their war stories from being in the field and where they are today, or what they're doing with their business, or what they hope to see in the world, or I mean, there's just so many, because you meet somebody, you don't know what it is they have to share, but by being able to say, you know what, all of this negative noise in the world, let's just sit here and talk about all the great things that you've been able to achieve from being in oil and gas, or being in the Permian Basin, or, you know, what you are wanting to implement into the world to make it better. It changes the conversation. And then to your point about the indirect marketing, the thing that's so fantastic about podcasting is that it is just good quality content that people can engage with, whether they're listening and learning, they're relating, it's just refreshing on their commute out into the field, or they're jumping on a plane. You know, they can listen to this and it inspires something else better. It's a ripple effect. Mm-hmm. And so you don't know what those ripples are going to be, but that's where it's very different than traditional marketing, because you aren't looking at direct sales. You aren't on, you know, an earnings call, but the value that you're putting out, it grows. And sure. So when you start a podcast, it does give you that vehicle to drive that kind of growth for yourself, that you're not just trying to sing and dance and entertain, but actually offering high value conversation, education, information, and stories that, again, people find that they're relating to, and also wanting to kind of get in front of that narrative, because this is something that's always going to be. It's a age-old argument about oil and gas, fossil fuels, trying to eliminate, and it's the battle to the finish line. But what is the finish line? Because it's nothing but, you know, a bridge that's on fire that everybody's trying to run away from, jumping onto the next one. And it's the same argument. Mm-hmm. But by being able to say, you know what, oil and gas industry, podcasting is a great way to put it out there without your voice being lost in the masses.
Sure. You'll find the voice. Yeah. You'll find your audience. I mean, frankly, like, you know, I find the topics in the episodes that you've had so far, you know, again, being for somebody who hasn't worked in that industry, right? Like hearing the stories that you're having with people, just like the, you know, being in it.
We were in
right?
It, yeah.
Being in the suck.
Yeah.
Right. And just going like, wow, that's super interesting. I also recognize that, like, I'm sure many people must know that, but incredibly tough jobs, right?
Yeah.
Back-breaking jobs.
Yeah.
And literally the world is on your back. And I instantly recognize, like, that would never be for me. I can clearly say that. I'm sitting there going like, oh, that sounds pretty easy. No. But those are the stories that are interesting. I think they would resonate, or they do resonate, not only with people who have experienced it personally, but from the outside world going like, oh, I might have never thought that.
Right. Well, and it's like, it's understandable. Like for me, like, why would you think like that? And there's so many things about working in the oil field that if you haven't been in the oil field and you haven't survived the oil field, you wouldn't know.
Sure.
Because, I mean, it is about
It's like being in the military, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many, and so it's not just limited to oil and gas, but that's where we are. That's where I've been. But, you know, and I think that all the disconnects that we have and the disharmony, it's like, okay, people that have served in the military, that have served overseas, that have been in battle, they come home and everybody's just on their phones and shopping and laughing and in their, you know, entertainment world. And the reason that they're able to shop and laugh and do all these things is because these people have been over here, you know, fighting for our freedom.
Sure.
But you don't think about that in your everyday life. But then the people that come back and they're seeing like they're not even appreciated or valued and should be more so. But then you kind of have that twofold. Well, there are so many people that I've known in oil and gas that have also served in the military. They're very active in, you know, helping veterans and different programs. Again, you wouldn't know that unless somebody came on a podcast and told that story, and not necessarily doing it with the intention of changing anyone's mind, but just putting the information out there and saying, hey, this is what's really going on a daily basis. And it's very different than you might think just in the context of seeing something on the news or knowing about it like, yeah, we're free because we have military,
right.
Or, you know, oh, we have a heater because of oil and gas. But to really go into the personal lives of the people that physically make it happen, that are physically the reason why we're safe and warm, there's a disconnect in that appreciation and also in the understanding.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the storytelling and the personal, you know, trials and tribulations, getting the sense of that is truly the benefit of these types of interviews, right? Versus like, you know, side eye sort of like spewing out an agenda to the cameras out there.
Absolutely.
Right? Like at the end of the day, like, you know, as a host of a podcast, as a guest of a podcast, like you should be just wanting to understand the story or, you know, of your guest versus like going like, you're not trying to like the moral of the story is.
You're not, because then you're trying to entertain the story when, you know, there's no agenda here. It's like, it's you and me as individuals and everybody's got a story. And then there's, I mean, people with really compelling stories, you know, of, you know, rags to riches. And it's so inspiring because it's like, I'm there, I've been there, I want to do that too. Or, you know, just an appreciation for the sacrifice that, you know, what people have gone through, what they've given up. And I don't think that it's ever going to, you know, completely eliminate the argument or, you know, people are set in their ways. But I think it's really exciting, especially for me and the people that I've met so far that have come on the show or scheduled to come on the show or have just been watching it. Like, hey, you know, that's really great. It's refreshing. You know, I learned something or just felt like you're not alone. You know, working in the oil field, especially, you can be very lonely. It's a very lonely environment.
Sure.
And then, you know, not only are you mentally taxed from the work, you're mentally taxed because of the hate from the world.
Right.
And then, you know, so then
I can see that. Yeah.
You have, you know, you're doubled down on loneliness and feeling like
I think you can become jaded in a way or you're resentful to, I guess, to a way.
Yeah, you absolutely can.
I can totally understand that. You know, it's like you said, I mean, for me, just from the outside world, I was like, man, these are incredibly tough jobs.
They're tough jobs. They make tough people.
You know, I commend anyone who's in this industry because, yeah, you're getting hit from all sides.
You really are. And so, like, surviving. And so, for me, I think surviving the beatdown of it. And, you know, I mean, like, when I worked in the field, like, it was not unheard of that there would be 50 people on location and I was the only woman. And that's also very lonely and isolating. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, being an equipment operator. Yeah, and so it's like you can keep going with that. And then you feel you are very much alone and, you know, still trying to do the work and make it happen and do it right. And it's dangerous. It can be extremely dangerous, you know, depending on the situation that you're in. And, then to go out into the world and it's like you're still an outsider. And so by being able to embrace your solitude really and being at peace with what you're doing and understanding what you're doing and just, doing your own thing, you develop thicker skin and you understand that it's more about the ignorance and the disconnect and the lack of experience, people that have just never been around it. And so for me, absolutely. I've been jaded. I've been resentful. I've been all the things, but I'm not anymore because I can look back and I can appreciate what I went through. I can appreciate all of those hard experiences or, everything that I was, just trying to understand about being in the field because there's no map and there's nobody really telling you how it's going to be because everybody has their own takeaway. Because, you come out here like maybe you're married, you've got 2 kids back home, or, you need the money, or, you're just out of school, or you are out of the military. So many different people come to the oil field from different walks of life, different backgrounds for different reasons. And so you find your way. But, with the Permian Basin, and I especially think Midland, Odessa, we have really embraced and embodied organizations, nonprofits, even back into like, the local businesses. And like, even with you not being from Midland or, the oil and gas industry at all, you're still providing a service that can highlight and support the oil and gas industry if people from the industry, choose to see the, the opportunity of being able to share their voice and their story.
Right. Like, obviously I never set out to, create a marketing business or now a podcast studio with oil and gas in mind, right? It was an oil and gas podcast studio. That's not my background, clearly. But I also recognize, like you just said, like there's a ton of opportunity here for the businesses who recognize this is ground floor things. And, I tell people all the time, I go, Dallas and Austin and Houston are coming, right? Probably more so Houston than anything. But, recognizing that we're not going anywhere, I was like, I love it here. Like from the first week I was here, I was like, I love this place, right? It was just so, I don't know, it was just so refreshing. I'm at a different stage in my life, I guess, right? And the opportunity to create my own business for the first time. But the businesses that jump on board, like everybody else is going to be in your dust, right? And this isn't a commercial to like say start a podcast. I'm just saying like I'm a marketing guy, and this is what I live and breathe. And I'm just going like, whoever does this, I'm not, my soapbox is only so high.
Right.
Right. But I'm just going out there like, whoever does this, I'm telling you, it's going to change the game. But obviously no pressure. Right. Like,
right. It's just putting it out there. And, that's kind of how I felt like when I met you and I saw that you had this here, it was like, okay, I'm going in this direction too. This makes sense. And, of course we had a few conversations before we got it off the ground, but in those conversations, like I see the future. I see exactly what you're saying, and it has been well received, and it has been a great experience. And I really look forward to what we do in 2024. We've already gotten off the ground, and I'm excited to see what it can bring, and just the different relationships that come from it, and the different stories that I'll get to hear and share. So I really appreciate you having the studio here, and I know there's so many people that have already benefited from it and that will in the future. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad I was able to, like I said, walk in the door.
Right.
Unlock the door.
That's right. Just set the recording and have the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
No, absolutely. It's been great talking to you.
No, kudos to you. Listen, kudos to you to coming. To seeking me out, coming here. Give it all the praise in the world. Definitely, I was like, finally. Oh, okay. Like it was exciting because I was like, because I produce a number of other podcasts. The proof is in the pudding for me. It was like at the end of the day, my wife and I have a podcast.
Right.
So we're going to have a studio regardless. Right. And, just through different talks, I was like, yeah, everybody can. You want a podcast? I was like Oprah. I was like, you want a podcast? Let's go. You want a podcast? You get a podcast. You get a podcast. And this is just in its infancy, right?
I agree. And, especially for me too, with oil and gas, those that don't, maybe they might not be ready or they, wouldn't want to commit to having their own show. It's nice, that they can come on and just have a platform to, hit the high points, talk about what they've got going on or where
Be a
they've been.
guest. It's fine.
Be
Yeah,
a
you don't have
guest.
to- yeah.
Just being a guest. There's so many different things, or being a partner of shows like this, getting involved somehow, working together, collaborating creatively, and keeping it all here in the Permian Basin.
Exactly. Midland for Midland.
Midland for Midland. Well, thanks again for coming on, Ryan.
Appreciate it.